Hello, everybody. My name is Wolf Geppert. As you probably know, I'm the chair of the European Astrobiology Institute, and I am glad to welcome you to this first seminar in the seminar series of the European Astrobiology Institute in 2023. And we have as guest today Jacques Arnould from the CNES, Centre National des Spatiales. And Jacques is not only doctor in history of science and theology, he's also an agricultural engineer, as I've learned. So I mean, he has a lot of different fields of knowledge, and mainly he's working at the CNES as an expert on ethics in space research, and this is really becoming a big issue now because of more and more commercial actors entering in space research and entering space exploitations, and there are lots of different ethical questions, not only in research but also in the commercial exploitation of research. He's also working in the field of theology, mostly working on the group of creationists and creationism and the history of creationism. And he has done a lot of different research on these different subjects. But now I would like to finish with my introduction and give the word to Jacques, and welcome to the first seminar of the European Astrobiology Institute in 2023.
So thank you, Wolf. Thank to Mariette for the practical help to prepare this time. I'm very happy to spend this time with you in this during this seminar concerning a for me, very interesting topic. As you see, I hope on my screen, on your screen, concerning astrobiology and religion. As Wolf mentioned just before, and thanks for this presentation, my double background in one way in the history of science and my engagement in the space, French Space Agency, and in the other side, my engagement in theology has some consequences. When I gave some conference concerning space and people try to know who I am, the first question after my conference normally is, okay, you explain us the question of space ethics or concerning space debris or space exploration, but what is your opinion concerning the discovery of extraterrestrial life and religion and the existence of God? And due to all this question repeatedly, I'm now interested by this question of connection, relation, perhaps conflict between what we name today astrobiology and what is named religion. In fact, if I try to summarize my seminar today, perhaps this sentence from Arthur C. Clarke is a very nice summary. And Clarke, in one of his books, wrote, a faith that cannot survive collision with the truth is not worth many regrets. And I think it's a very good summary concerning this topic of astrobiology. I mean, the discovery or the research of extraterrestrial life and religion. Because a lot of conflict, question, interrogation, and problems is coming from this collision between the truth or the hypothesis, scientific hypothesis, and faith, religious faith, or some ideology. But I try to provide more matter concerning this topic. First, I can observe as you in our actual culture a lot of example of collision, not directly between faith and truth, but for example, after this time of Christmas, some collision between Santa Claus and extraterrestrial life. And it's very interesting because it's a very simple, usual now way to illustrate the fact that in our cultures, with an S, we have a lot of example of what I name an inevitable encounters between um, metaphysics or religion, God, divine, celestial people, and what we summarize with astrobiology or extraterrestrial life. And I'm not sure that Santa Claus is an extra in an ET, but it's in one way, it's a good illustration of the fact that this question uh, of astrobiology and religion is probably an older subject of interest that a lot of people today think. Um, Due to the fact that when people try to imagine other being, extraterrestrial life or other way, other being. And when they are thinking about religion, uh, they they use the same words, the same experience, the same illustration, and very few examples. Uh, First, this is a very common example in our domain. I mean, not especially astrobiology, but the domain of UFO. I don't know if you know that, but in CNES, in the French Space Agency, we have a little department interested by UFO, and the service we try to provide is to give answer to people who call us and say, okay, I have seen something very strange in the sky yesterday or 1 month ago, or perhaps more longer ago, and I want to know what I saw at this time. And when they try to give a testimony of their experience, um, they can call us, they can write us, or sometimes they give some drawing as on this example. They use the same way to illustrate, to explain their experiences as in former time, people try to tell the story of a religious apparition. Uh, in this case, I use a very famous religious event during the 19th century in France, in the Alps. And it's the same story, in fact. I mean, not the same story, but the same way to share this experience. So actually, I mean, it's the common ground of experience between religious experience and extraterrestrial experience. That probably an explanation of the fact that even today, uh, as I mentioned just before, in my own experience, when people are thinking space, thinking extraterrestrial life, in the same time, they have in another part of their brain all the religious culture, spiritual experience. And it's not always a conflict, but sometimes it's a connection between the two domains. Another example is this next one, coming from another sort of another part of our culture. It's a connection built between the biblical tradition, so the really a sort of religious tradition, and again the UFO experience. And in this case, you have a very famous story in the Bible. Is the moment of the prophet Elijah is is escaping to the sky at the end of his life. And the text in the Bible is very clear. The disciple of Elijah is is uh, is watching a chariot with a fire chariot arriving from the sky, and Elijah is using this chariot to go in the sky. And the modern interpretation from people engaged in the UFO research, this explanation is very clear. It's a proof of the existence of UFO, of space vessel in the past, and in this case, the prophet was using um, a flying saucer, a space vessel to go to the sky. And in fact, the prophet is a sort of extraterrestrial person. And it's very interesting because in sometimes this sort of connection between old tradition, biblical tradition, and new interpretation, modern interpretation in the UFO context, sometimes is a proof of the truth of the Bible, due to the fact that what the Bible is explaining is always arriving, is today is arriving, and sometimes it's a way to prove the reality of UFO using the testimony of the past tradition. Again, it's sort of this connection could seems very strange to us, but it's a it's a connection that you can discover in many examples today. In the same direction, you have you can find today a lot of publication, illustration, trying to make connection between religion or religious tradition and this idea of extraterrestrial life, UFO, and all this modern culture with the Bible, with the Old Testament, the New Testament, of the in this case, a Qumran tradition, and even some more strange spirituality. And last example in the same direction is a very famous books and all a lot of books around that it's the work of von Däniken, and this idea of that what we name in the past and today gods are in fact old astronauts, and also this sort of interpretation of tradition of some monuments as pyramids and all this culture. I recognize that you can find what you want if you are going in this direction, and a mixture of very interesting things and less interesting things. But that's our actual condition. And that's the reason when you receive some question, as in my situation, from people, you can find what you want, and it's not always easy to make distinction between very interesting interrogation and what is more some only very non-interesting object of interest. But that's the actual situation. What is more interesting for us is to say, okay, the question is if religion were or are ready to meet aliens. You find, in fact, quite two situations. From some people, alien will destroy religion, and for other people, alien could create religion. And you find some example to answer yes and no to these two questions. Um, it's not only few, it's not very rare. Um, will alien destroy religion? I met a lot of people really afraid by this idea of extraterrestrial life. I remember a few years ago, after I published a book concerning this topic, one of my friends, uh, very religious and a little conservative, explained me that if tomorrow scientists uh, give the proof of the existence of extraterrestrial life, as believer, he would be very, very surprised and very sad because it's in contradiction with his own belief, with his own faith. Sure that for this man, he's Christian with a very clear geocentric, anthropocentric spirituality, the idea of other intelligent being in another place of the universe has some contradiction with his own belief. And yes, in this case, aliens will destroy his own religion. I also heard some scientists explain me that okay, they are waiting on the discovery of aliens uh, because one of the good consequences could be the destruction of religion, and because I defend the idea that okay, now religion are uh, uh, are no more useful for humankind and not only not yet not useful but also very dangerous. So the discovery of aliens could be a good news for humankind. Um, Concerning the fact that aliens could perhaps create religion, uh, is probably not the first interest, but I use this image of a French man who promote a movement pro alien, and it's a sort of religious movement. Is quite, I can say, is a little natural because people probably some people need supernatural, need something different of the terrestrial daily life, and the idea of other being perhaps more intelligent, more powerful, or more wise could be a way to promote the arrival of these entities to help to redeem our humankind. And you can find some example of new religion promoting the life of alien or extraterrestrial life. But in fact, if you take time and try to find some serious studies concerning how religion today are welcoming the idea of extraterrestrial life, you can find not so catastrophic result. And one of my friend, Ted Peters, this man encountering not an extraterrestrial life, but a koala in Australia. Yes, Peters conduct a survey 10 years ago in California, where he's a professor, and he conducts this survey and ask question concerning how people, probably a lot of students from from Berkeley or Oakland, this part of California, San Francisco, how these students are welcoming the idea of the discovery of a civilization of intelligent being on another planet. And in this survey, you find some Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, Mormon, you see Jewish, Buddhist, and even non-religious people. That is in America some quite rare. And the result is very clear. For all these people, confirmation of the existence of an extraterrestrial life, extraterrestrial intelligent civilization is not really a problem. And And I think that for me, it's a good news. Perhaps the people I mentioned just before, for the more conservative religious people, or for scientists who try to destroy religion and the bad influence of religion, thanks to the discovery of extraterrestrial life. It's not a good news, but in fact, it seems that uh, common believers have not really problem with this idea. And it, in the survey, you have other example concerning another question, but it's always the same result. Um, what is the reason of this acceptance of the idea of extraterrestrial life by the majority, probably, of religious people? Uh, One of the reasons is depending of the religion. What is your religion? I mentioned that just before with the example of my friend, my Christian friend, afraid by the idea of the existence of ET. Christianity or Jewish tradition and are anthropocentric religions. Sure that for this tradition, the idea of extraterrestrial life could be not so evident to accept. But for so many religions around the world during the human uh, time, the human period, so many religions are not anthropocentric, are more cosmocentric, with a scale in space and time so big that it's quite normal to accept the idea of other being in another place, other time, but analogous to us with intelligence, with consciousness, with culture is not a real problem. Um, Today, again, the problem is, I agree, more for what we sometimes name the religion of the book, uh, Bible or Quran. But even in this religion, it seems that today you find a lot of people and a lot of believers, and sometimes the leader of this religion, open to the idea of other life in the universe. You can find in the Catholic Church, uh, and I find this quite not really serious sentence of Pope Francis, but opens the door to the Catholic Church. They are open to everyone, and even to aliens. It's easy to say that when you are living in Rome today. A more interesting analysis is coming from the astronomer, Jesuit astronomer Consumano. In this book, would you baptize an extraterrestrial? Um, but we are probably today at a point with a result of centuries and millennia of interrogation, philosophical interrogation, and also theological interrogation. Um, it's not, in fact, a new subject, and it's probably one of what I one of the topic the second topic I want to share with you today after the sentence of Arthur Clarke. The fact that this question is a very old question in the in the history of science and philosophy. In fact, we have, I can say, two noble questions about nature in the philosophical and religious tradition. And these two questions are summarized on this interesting slide. Um, so it's again the result of a survey in the United States a few years ago, perhaps yes 5 or 10 years ago, concerning two questions. First, the origin of life on Earth, and after the question of extraterrestrial life. And quite the same percentage of people in this country are believing in intelligent alien and in creation. And so it's for me the main interesting reason or main interesting perspective concerning the subject of today, astrobiology and religion. Uh, uh, the occasion or the invitation to think about these two noble questions. The first, yes, the origin of life on Earth. Um, as scientists, we are interested by the beginning and the evolution of life on Earth. The end is in the future, and it's more and more hypothetical. In fact, in religion, for example, in Christian religion, these three um, parts of our interest for life, beginning, evolution, and the end, are also three different parts of the religious and theological interrogation. What we name in Latin is more serious, creatio ab initio, the beginning, continua, evolution, and nova, the end. As you know, and Wolf mentioned that in his presentation, um, the question with creationism, I mean, all this movement of opposition to evolution, is precisely the fact that these creationists refuse to combine these three theological aspects, creatio ab initio, continua, and nova, with the scientific results. And these people are using a literalist, fundamentalist, and integrist perspective and attitude with the religious tradition, especially with the Bible or the Quran. And if you are using this way to read your sacred book uh, by a literarist perspective, I mean, strictly what arrived in the past is written in a book and is not different, for example, or integrism is more an attitude in the society where everybody has to believe the same as you. You know what is the consequence of this sort of attitude is a what we have today in conflict between your faith or their religious faith and what we try to teach in university or to research in our lab. And in fact, it's not easy question. I recognize that. You know as me that today with with the main place occupied by the evolutionary theory and especially with Darwinism, the question of the balance between chance and necessity is not an easy question. It's not only a question for religious people, it's a question for philosophers, it's a question for scientists. And in my country, not everybody, but a lot of people in science know the book of Jacques Monod, all now, it was published more than 50 years ago, Le hasard et la nécessité, chance or necessity. This book was introducing at this time a serious topic, and what I know is that this question is always open. The same with this question of the origin of life is that is a real challenge for education and science communication. in our society, especially in France, where we have a secular societies. And we receive quite every day information concerning some difficulties, conflict in school, in university, due to the fact that, yes, trying to teach evolution is in fact introducing not only a scientific question, but also a philosophical and uh, religious question. And just an example, if you are working and living in France, probably you see the last magazine L'Express from last week, and the main topic of this exemplar was concerning precisely this question of obscurantism, creationism, and how people refuse the actual data and theory in science. We know that a way to find an exit to this conflict situation is probably what Stephen Jay Gould names the NOMA principle, non-overlapping magisterial, and he proposed that in his book um, presenting the creationist debate. Yes, it's probably the first step, trying to respect the two domains, the two magister, magister of science and magister of religion. But we know that it's not enough, because if you try to engage your education in this NOMA or with NOMA principle, you can arrive in one way in the actual situation of the actual not situation, but what creationists request today is a balanced treatment between evolution science and creation or creation science or intelligent design science. And it is also a little dangerous. What is necessary, in my opinion, is to introduce more and more philosophy. The job of philosophy is to have an overview situation, and trying to analyze the situation in science, in religion, to find where are in fact, the common questions, the difference between question, and perhaps to find a way to go forward and to avoid uh, as possible to avoid the conflict. So the first noble question is the origin of life on Earth. And the other noble question is the question of, is there life elsewhere? And for religion, it's really a very, very old question. In former period, we philosophers don't use the idea of extraterrestrial life. As you know, the common way to mention this topic was to speak about the plurality of inhabited worlds. And this question was and is always in connection with the idea of creation in Latin. And the question is how to combine the faith in a creator and the possible hypothetical plurality of worlds in the universe, in the cosmos. In fact, this question is also connected with another very interesting topic, especially for anthropocentric religion. In Christianity, the question of redemption. Is it necessary to have only one incarnation of Christ on earth, or is it necessary to have the incarnation of God on each planet with other form of life? On this slide, and perhaps I can share after that all this sentence, I give some example of the fact that this question of ET life again is a very very old question in philosophy in Occident. I begin here with a quotation of Albertus Magnus, and that's the reason I mentioned a Nobel question. You can read that he mentions this question as one of the most noble questions in nature. Uh, but you can see also that in the same time, in the 13th century, I mentioned this question of um, the debate in Paris between peoples, explaining that we could have only one world, and the other saying, no, it's not possible to say we have only one world. We cannot reduce the power of God, the divine omnipotence. uh, I want to mention the work of Giordano Bruno in the 16th century, a very interesting man, in fact, more philosopher than scientist, but he was the first, he was just at the frontier between old time and modern time. And one of the reasons of his condemnation in Rome and his death in Rome just in 1600. What was one of the reasons was his defense of the plurality of word, as you can see on this sentence. In his opinion, it was other universe was infinite with sun and planet around sun, and a very very modern view, even if Bruno was not an astronomer, and Galilei is just arriving after, and it's an interesting historical point that Bruno and Galilei were in competition for a position in Padova University in 1582 or perhaps 90. In the 18th century, with the example of Thomas Paine, you can see that this question of the plurality of words was an ideological point of conflict. Thomas Paine used this hypothesis of plurality of words to deny the existence of God and to defend an atheistic position. Um, and so, at the same time, one century after, in Great Britain, especially in the 19th century, a man as William Whewell was a very engaged person in this topic, and you can find a lot of debate in Great Britain at this time concerning the people pro and people contra the existence of other planets and other population in the sky. And I arrived at the 20th century. Very interesting sentence due to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, this French scientist, and who wrote during the First World War an incredible sentence in which he mentioned the possible polymorphic manifestation of the Christ on various planets, and sure that this sort of idea is quite not totally heretic in the Catholic Church, but is very strange. But again, it's an illustration of the fact that this question was and had a real place in the religious tradition, and also in the last century. And sorry for all this sort of list à la Prévert, but the last sentence is coming from famous Carl Sagan with a very interesting invitation to the religion. Sagan probably don't share the classical religious belief, but he invites religion to open the perspective to the universe, to the infinite dimension of the universe, and the possibility of other life in the universe. He criticized the classical religion for their, their to think not too big. Okay, it's an invitation to think bigger and to think in connection with the actual idea of the universe. And and I think it's this invitation is probably the, the third point uh, of my presentation today, and belong to my conclusion, uh, opening our mind, especially religious mind, but also in philosophy. What is a different topic of point for my conclusion? First, I agree that creationists have good reason to believe in creation, as they can do that, but they have no reason to believe in the creation science. It's necessary to make this a distinction between theological um, point, theological reference, and that, and we have to respect this idea. But in what we name, or what they name, creation science, this connection, this confusion between religious purpose linked with creation and a scientific purpose, this confusion is not only dangerous, is not acceptable. Uh, we can learn a lot from the history of creationism. Um, I I make the job. I mean to to learn from the history, to first to learn the history of creationism, and we can learn a lot from the history of creationism. In fact, all what we name as position as literalism, concordism, fundamentalism, in fact, are posture very difficult to question, to manage, to reason. And I think that among you people know that is today sometimes not only creationism, but it's also complotism. Uh, we have to to struggle with all this attitude, and it's not easy to engage, to introduce reason when people are in this attitude of concordism, fundamentalism, integrism. Again, I refers to the NOMA principle of Gould, very interesting, to refuse to no overlapping, as Gould explained, is probably the first step, but in the same time, it's necessary to make a bridge between all these domains, because we are not normally schizophrenic. And we know that, okay, it's my opinion. For me, a human being is not only uh, a question of knowledge and refusing all the belief. It's not only a question of belief, refusing all the knowledge. We have to manage all these dimensions of the human condition. So the NOMA principle is very important to avoid the conflict. But after that, we need the philosophical approach and to make a bridge and to make a connection with between all these dimensions of the human consciousness. Um, the urgency of theological work. Uh, I never say that we have all to become theologian, but we have to invite all the religious tradition, especially if they have some difficulties with science, first to learn what is science, but second to engage real study in their own theology. I mean, to introduce intelligence and reason in their process to believe, and not only to read literalism, their sacred book. At least another invitation to all what we name in religious domain ecumenism or inter-religious work. I mentioned before, at the occasion of the Peter survey, that you can see that you have different tradition, and especially the Oriental tradition are more open to the actual scale of space and time coming from science, and probably that the religions in Occident have a lot to learn from the Oriental tradition in their own attitude and position face to the universe. So it's for me an invitation for more relation between religion with respect for each identity, but also with curiosity for the other. And perhaps curiosity, at least, could be the main one of the main idea when you are in difficulties with the truth. Remember the first sentence of Clarke. Truth could be very confusing. You can be very troubled by truth, but by curiosity, perhaps you can discover that behind truth, it's a way to go forward, and a way which engage at least faith, because faith is always, for me, going forward. So, thanks for your attention. Even if in this sort of situation, it's very difficult to, during this first part, to have some relation with you. If you need some references, I mentioned only a few coming from theologian as Ted Peters, or also scientists are Martinez Ewet. They're two very interesting historical books from Stephen Dick and Michael Crow concerning the idea of extraterrestrial life in the history of ideas and philosophy. And you can see that from Democritus to Kant, and from Kant to Lowell, it's a very long story, a millennium story. And at least I mentioned three publications I published, yes, concerning creationists in English, and the two the other are in French. I'm sorry, but it's also concerning the extraterrestrial question from a more philosophical and theological point of view. Again, thank you, and I'm waiting for our exchange.
I used to be a Catholic, and at that time I was always bothered by the fact that Christ has came only to 20th century ago, and before that there was a very, very long time where humans were not knowing, at least, that they were redempted. You know, the message of the Christ, they could not have it. And this was a kind of very strong inequality, and I was very bad with that. Bad feeling.
I totally share your idea of inequality, and it's one of the reasons of my interest with this question of plurality, because you can say the same if you are too Christocentric, and if you reduce the redemption to only only a little part of the time, as you mentioned, only 20th century ago and the time after and before nothing, and in the other world nothing, and this reduced perspective could be and is, in fact, for me, and it seems for you also, yes, unacceptable. What is the destiny of all the other on Earth before, all the other perhaps in the universe? And I don't have the answer. It's a question of belief. Yeah, it's not we don't have proof of the redemption. I mean, a concrete or scientific proof. But accepting the question is, as I mentioned at the end, it is an invitation to ask yourself, what is your own belief, and which are the limits of your belief, or the possible opening of your belief. When I give the sentence of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, if you remember, just at the end of my talk, and Teilhard mentioned the polymorphic venue of Christ on other planets, because in his own opinion, it was also unacceptable that all the other places in the universe, on the other place, the Christ has no influence. Again, the same question as I shared just now. The fact that if you are too reduced in your opinion, you say, okay, it's only for a few elected people, and the other, no interest. Teilhard refused that. And that's the reason he proposed, it's only a theological proposition or a theological hypothesis of this polymorphic manifestation of Christ. I recognize that it's not a Catholic dogma. It's only a Catholic question or a Christian question. And
yes,
the question is,
it does not work even for our own Earth. Again, 20th century is minute,
yes,
during the appearance vivacity of men on Earth.
If you have, yes, if you have the occasion to read Teilhard, I don't know if you have some idea of Teilhard de Chardin. It's a very common interest for him to introduce this what he names the cosmic dimension of Christian power or Christianity, and he was working during the first 50 years of the 20th century. And at this time, with a new discovery in science, new discovery in astronomy, you know that the Big Bang theory is during this period. So the scale of the universe at this time was evolving very rapidly. And he was very interesting by what Carl Sagan explained. Is it possible to adapt or not? Adapt is not a very good term, but what is the answer of the Christian tradition to the new dimension of the universe? And by this way, in fact, he rejoined the question you are mentioning, the fact that, but what is going concerning the former generation? In fact, in the very old Christian tradition, what we name the first father of church, the father of church, they have the same question, not concerning the universe, because at this time the cosmos was very reduced, but the question of the past. What is the destiny of the people before us? And that's the reason they introduce this idea of cosmic Christ. In fact, the cosmic Christ, the idea of the influence of Christ is not only reduced to our time, our little planet, but also this influence is also concerning the generation before us. It's a very interesting, again, it's a theological question. And for me, you have a relation between this idea of cosmic Christ in Teilhard de Chardin, the rediscovery of this very old tradition during the 20th century due to the Big Bang theory and evolution theory and what Teilhard says, the human phenomena, and the question of extraterrestrial life. Teilhard mentioned also the same question more in the 50s during conference, and he clearly take position in favor for the hypothesis of other life in the universe. And for him, it was not in contradiction with the Christian faith. In fact, he was answering the invitation of Carl Sagan before the invitation. But I recognize it's belong to the domain of the faith. It's not proof. It's how you believe or not. But what I want to underline is the fact that in the tradition you find a lot of elements where people, where believer, in fact, was trying to answer all these questions, all these very modern questions concerning extraterrestrial life or in relation with extraterrestrial life.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, there is then a question by Angelica. Thank you for this excellent talk. Could you comment on how philosophy view of religion relates to Universal Declaration of Human Rights by UN Article 18 on religious freedom?
Wow. I don't have an immediate answer to that. Clear that what I mentioned now, if you could understand my position, which is very open to the, I could say that the diversity of opinions, the diversity of culture, not only on Earth, but perhaps also in other places in the universe. Sure that it's a real challenge concerning the freedom of thinking, of believing, and the common respect between us. It doesn't mean that you can accept everything, because after you have some moral references and ethics references and the respect of the freedom of the other, but first is to admit that we nobody is the center of the universe, and nobody is the center as with our knowledge or with our faith. And even if it's difficult to accept that, and I know that for especially with for Occidental religion, this idea that other religions have their own way to apprehend the world, to apprehend the reality. It's a long way to admit the diversity of religion, but it's a necessary way. That's the reason in my conclusion, one of my last point was more concerning the necessity of the ecumenical relation or inter-religious relation, a way to introduce more and more peaceful relation is first to be interested by the other and to discover how the other are with their own way to believe. And sometimes it's surprising, but it's today we know when we are watching around the world, it's a real necessity. And but by respecting especially the religious identity of the other culture around the world. I'm not sure to have really good answer this question.
Yeah, there is then a question by Giuseppe Morante. Please go ahead.
Hello, Jacques. Thanks for the very, very interesting seminar. That for me was especially interesting because I don't agree with practically everything you said. So I have a couple of points. The first one is a small complaint on your conclusions because you seem to ignore non-believers. And non-believers are the majority of humanity, not the minority. So this is a complaint. The second point is about Noma. Noma was strongly criticized by, for instance, by Richard Dawkins or by Christopher Hitchens and by a number of persons like them, just because it requires respect from both sides. While usually religions tends to interpret noma in this way, science must not say a word about religion, but religion can say what they want on science, and science cannot complain. So if this is noma, noma has to be completely dismissed. This is my question. How do you think about this?
Thank you. You had two very interesting points for debate, and probably that the distential way is not really a good condition to have a real debate. But I try to answer. First, I never forget non-believer, and that's the reason I sometimes I mention in the debate the place of the author when some non-believer scientists explain me, we are waiting on extraterrestrial discovery to avoid to destroy religion and to avoid all the bad effect of religion. Okay, I met this person. I really respect this person. In other side, I am not a non-believer. I cannot speak for these people, and it's probably interesting to have the same seminar from another people, from a non-believer. But I only want to give you, to share you my position as believer and as theologian. That was my idea, my goal during this time, and the time is always too short to share all this sort of data. But sorry if I give the impression to forget non-believer, but not be afraid. I never forget all the majority around me, and especially in the scientific community. Sometimes I have to struggle with some believer which we ignore totally all this majority, and okay, it's a very interesting position for me to sometimes to seem to belong to one or to the other community, but I have no time to explain you more. Concerning the nomad principle, I agree with you. I never say it's the solution. I only want to mention one of the solutions proposed by Gould a long time ago, which is always a reference, and as all reference, it's a debated reference. I know that Richard Dawkins has another solution, as probably a lot of people among you. I read The God Delusion 10 years ago or 12 years ago. It's a very interesting analysis of the situation, very interesting proposition, sometimes solution. Not sure that it's only another solution, different from the NOMA solution, to go forward, because it's always my interest how to first to avoid the conflict and trying to be tomorrow more intelligent, more reasonable. And that's the reason I mentioned one of the solutions proposed by Gould, and at the same time, I mentioned the fact that it's not the final or the ultimate solution, because this sort of as I say, perhaps too rapidly, no overlapping as could have a bad consequence is a sort of schizophrenic situation. You separate the domain, but I know that we are not in our heads, we have not the same separation. And that's the first reason. I know also, as you, I refuse the position when religious people say you have not, as scientists, you have not to intervene in our domain, but us as religious, we have the final word or the final conclusion. No, it has never been my position, and people who know me know that I always try to make a big difference, always at the same time. I can tell you a very little story. A few years ago, I make an interview for the TV, the French TV, concerning creationism. And a team of the TV visit me, and we began the interview, and they asked me to present the creationist movement, and I do that during perhaps 10 or 15 minutes. And after this presentation, one of the member of this team say me, "I'm sorry, Mr. Arnould, I'm a little surprised because I cannot say from on which side you are. Are you creationist or not?" I said, okay, it was my job. You asked me to present the creationist movement, and I tried to make that from an objective point of view. Now, if you ask me, what is my position, uh, I can explain you my position. I am not a creationist, but the first time it was I tried to give an scientific presentation of creationism. It's a way to separate the domain, not to critique one domain or the other. But after, again, my goal is to promote the dialogue and to avoid what we can see today, especially in school or university, young people in trouble with science education due to their own religious education. That's not acceptable today, and it's very dangerous for our society and our future. You can use the NOMA principle, you can use the Dawkins principle, you can use what you want, but propose me or we have to engage ourselves in a way to avoid this schizophrenic situation where young people have to make a choice between science and religion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any
We have a lot of things to discuss, but not now.
Yes, yes. Other occasion, please.